The verdict was not guilty, but the silence was deafening. It was a victory without a prize. This is the story of how a good deed led to the end of a good boy. The humid air hung heavy, thick with the scent of summer rain. On the porch of a faded, yellow house, a boy's hands moved with practiced grace. They were young hands, strong and sure, tracing the maze of wires inside a broken television set. He was Aaron Miller, a boy with a mind full of circuits and a heart full of hope. The television flickered to life, its screen a ghost in the twilight. A small victory. He didn't know the victory would cost him everything. He didn't know that on the other side of the screen another narrative was already being written. And he was the villain. His hands, still warm from the humming television, belonged to a 16-year-old boy with a dream. The dream was to be an engineer, to build something that mattered, something unbreakable. He saw the world in schematics. His room was a sanctuary of wires and discarded electronics, a quiet rebellion against the silence of his small, dusty town. He was tall for his age, with an easy smile and a shy confidence that vanished when the world watched him too closely. Every day the world watched. The cold stares from passing cars, the quick lock of a door when he walked by, the way store clerks' eyes followed him, not with curiosity, but with a quiet, practiced suspicion. He saw it all, felt it all, but never spoke of it. His escape was in the rhythm of his life, his basketball, the clean snap of the net, his schoolwork, the satisfying click of a problem solved, and lately in the quiet company of Mrs. Garcia. Mrs. Garcia lived on his street, a frail woman with silver hair and eyes that held the kindness of a different time. She had watched him grow up, always offering a gentle wave or a few dollars for lemonade. She had become his latest project. Not her, but the loneliness that had settled on her like dust. He would stop by, sit on her porch, and simply be present. He didn't know these quiet moments, these simple acts of human kindness, were being observed, that every shadow held a witness. He didn't know this was the last week life would feel normal. The air grew cool. The silence of the neighborhood was a different kind of quiet now, a heavy quiet. Aaron pedaled his bike home, the screens, faint glow a memory in his mind. He didn't see the dark sedan parked at the corner. He didn't see the two men inside, their faces lit by the glow of a cell phone. He only felt the soft victory of his good deed. He went to bed, a boy with clean hands and a clear conscience, not knowing that a photograph, a single still frame, had just been taken. A photograph of a shadow moving across the porch, a shadow that would be seen as a threat. He slept deeply, a sleep he would never feel again. The next morning, a knock on the door. It wasn't the light tap of a neighbor. It was hard, insistent, like a hammer against wood. Aaron sat up in bed, a cold dread in his stomach. The sound was wrong. It was a sound that had no place in his quiet, safe home. He heard his father's voice, a low rumble of surprise. And then a colder, sharper voice, one he didn't recognize. The voices grew louder. His stomach knotted. He knew without being told. This wasn't a casual visit. He didn't know it yet, but the police officer was here for him. He crept out of his room, the floorboards groaning beneath his feet. He saw his parents standing in the doorway, their faces a mix of confusion and fear. Two men in uniform stood, on the porch, their hands resting on their belts. One was tall and stern, his eyes like chips of ice. The other was younger, with a face that held no expression at all. Aaron's heart hammered against his ribs. The cold dread spread. He saw Mrs. Garcia standing a few feet away, her shoulders hunched, a silent witness. The officers didn't speak to her. Their eyes were locked on Aaron. He felt his blood turn to ice. His mother's face paled. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. His father stepped forward, his body a shield. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked. The tall officer didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on Aaron. It was a cold gaze, a gaze of judgment. The officer held out a small metallic object, a lockbox. "We received a report of a theft," he said, his voice flat. "A valuable family heirloom, stolen from this residence." Aaron's mind reeled. He hadn't touched a lockbox. He hadn't touched anything but the television. Looked at Mrs. Garcia, expecting her to speak up, to clarify, to laugh at the ridiculous mistake. But she just stared at him, her face a mask of what seemed to be a quiet, weary resignation. He felt a profound sense of loneliness, a silent accusation. The younger officer stepped forward, his hand moving towards Aaron. The gesture was swift and practiced. A handcuff appeared. "You're coming with us, son," he said. The words hit Aaron like a physical blow. The world swayed around him. He felt his mother's hand on his arm, a gentle tremor, a silent plea. He didn't know that the lockbox had been a gift to Mrs. Garcia from her son, a man who saw Aaron not as a boy, but as a stereotype. The car ride was a blur of flashing lights and silent streets. Every passing face, every dark window, felt like an accusation. Aaron was placed in a small room with a metal table and 2 chairs. It was cold. A fluorescent light hummed overhead, a constant, irritating drone. The tall officer sat opposite. Him, his face a hard mask. He asked questions, the same questions, over and over. Where did he find the lockbox? What did he do with the contents? Aaron's answers, simple and true, were met with an impatient sigh. "We have witnesses," the officer said. "We have a report." Aaron felt a crushing weight settle on his shoulders. He was caught in a trap he didn't even know was being set. He was told Mrs. Garcia had found the lockbox in her rose garden, empty. She had reported it. He learned that her son, a man named Robert, was a police officer in a neighboring city. Robert had told his mother to report any suspicious activity. He had sent her the lockbox as a gift, something to put her most precious belongings in. He had told her to be careful of people wandering around her house. Mrs. Garcia, perhaps, through fear or a misunderstanding, had followed his instructions perfectly, but she hadn't given them the crucial detail. She hadn't told them who Aaron was, a boy who had only wanted to help. Now her silence was his undoing. It was a silence filled with fear and a quiet, terrible prejudice. The interrogation continued. Aaron felt the walls of the room closing in, on him. His mind, once a fortress of logical solutions, was now a whirlwind of confusion. He answered every question, gave them every detail of the previous day, of his life, of his dreams, but his words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The officer stared at him, his gaze unwavering, a silent judgment hanging in the air. "We know you. Took it, son," he said. "Just tell us where it is." Aaron wanted to scream. He wanted to break down the door. He wanted to tell them what he hadn't told anyone. That the day before, as he fixed the TV, Mrs. Garcia's son had driven by, a shadow, in a black sedan. He had stared at Aaron, his face a silent sneer. Aaron had felt the cold hostility radiating from him. He hadn't known then that the hostility was the first brick in the wall of his own prison. He didn't know that the very act of a black boy, helping an old woman, could be seen as a criminal act. Days blurred into weeks. The world, once a place of simple joys, became a hostile and confusing landscape. The charge was grand larceny. The value of the lockbox and its phantom contents were inflated by Mrs. Garcia's son. A family heirloom, a priceless artifact. The media, a local paper, and a few online blogs picked up the story. Teen thug steals from elderly woman. Good deed a cover for a heist. The headlines were a blaring siren of false accusations. His name, once just a name, became a scarlet letter. His dreams, once so close he could almost touch them, became distant and unreachable. He couldn't go to school. He couldn't play basketball. Every door that had been open to him was now slammed shut. He felt the weight of a system designed to crush him. The public defender, a tired man with sad eyes, advised him to take a plea deal. "They have an eyewitness, son," he said, his voice a weary sigh. "The old lady, it's her word against yours." Aaron was a boy in a world of men. He was a good boy, a kind boy, a boy who fixed broken things. But the world saw him through a lens of ingrained prejudice, and through that lens, he was not a boy, but a threat. His life was not a story of hope, but a cautionary tale. He saw Mrs. Garcia once more, at the courthouse. She wouldn't meet his eyes. Her face was a mask of sorrow and shame, but she didn't retract her statement. She didn't save him. Her silence, a single devastating act, was the final betrayal. The air in the courtroom was cold. The judge, a stoic man in a black robe, spoke in a monotonous voice. Aaron's parents sat behind him, their faces drawn and pale. The prosecution presented its case, the empty lockbox, the witness statement, the police report. The narrative was simple, clean, and devastatingly false. There was no room for nuance, for kindness, for the truth. The defense's arguments felt hollow, like empty words in a vast, silent hall. Aaron felt a creeping sense of unreality. He wasn't a criminal. He wasn't a thug. He was a boy who wanted to build things, a boy who wanted to go to college, a boy who had fixed a TV. The verdict came quickly. Not guilty, but in the long walk home, in the silent house, nothing had changed. The truth was out, but the stains remained. The school wouldn't take him back. The basketball scholarship was gone. The world hadn't seen his innocence, only the spectacle of his trial. It was a victory without a prize, a freedom without a future. His name was cleared, but his life was ruined. He sat in his room, surrounded. By his projects, the humming of the television, he had fixed a distant, mocking sound. He saw his future shattered into a million pieces. A good deed had led to this. A simple act of kindness, twisted and weaponized by a world that saw a boy not as he was, but as a threat. The years passed. The old woman's house remained, a silent yellow monument to a single act of kindness and its terrible consequence. Aaron, once a boy of promise, became a man of shadows. He found a job on the wrong side of town, fixing old cars, his engineer's hands now stained with grease and oil. His face was no longer lit by the easy joy of a boy with a dream. It was a face that had seen too much, a face that had learned the cold, hard lesson of injustice. His mother and father, their hearts broken, had grown quiet, their pride in him replaced by a weary sadness. The town, once his home, had become a place of silent, staring faces, each a reminder of the story they had all chosen to believe. And the television on Mrs. Garcia's porch, the one he had fixed, still worked perfectly. It sat there, a testament to his skill, a cruel, mocking symbol of what he had lost. What happens to a good deed when the world refuses to see it as good? What happens when a boy's kindness is met with a system designed to see only his skin? When a helping hand is seen as a reaching for what is not yours? For what is the point of being a good man in a world that only sees a bad boy? If a single act of kindness can change a life, what happens when it's a single act of injustice? Aaron's story proves that sometimes the greatest betrayals aren't from enemies, but from a system that fails to see the truth. What's a similar story of injustice you've heard? Share it in the comments. Your support keeps these stories alive, so please subscribe,